Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joe Utichi. I'm the awards line editor at Deadline, and it's my pleasure to be your moderator this evening and to introduce you to the wonderful, the one and only, and a man who does a very good version of that sea shanty as he was just demonstrating backstage, Mr. Willem Dafoe.
Evening.
Willem, this character is another incredible creation in a career marked by many of them.
Thank you.
I wonder how it was initially presented to you. You knew Robert a bit. You'd met Robert before.
I forced a meeting with him. I saw The Witch, and I knew nothing about it. I went in really cold, and I thought, wow, there's a real filmmaker behind this film. That was his first feature, The Witch. And I said to my representatives, can I get a meeting with this guy? Because I think he's really a real talent. And I met him, and we got along very well. We spoke a similar language. He comes from the theater, as I do. He knew my work from the theater. He knew my work from movies. We got along, and basically I said, if you have something to do for me in your next project, basically, you know, call me up. And that was this.
Funny you mention it. Well, tell me about your reaction to this character, to this script then. I mean, what kind of leapt off the page for you about Thomas?
Well, you know, the whole world, you know, you read 1890, you know, Lighthouse, you read the description of where all the action is basically going to take place, and then you read the language. It's pretty, it's not often that you get to play with language in a film like this. Language that's poetic, full of images, is elevated, has a music, has a rhythm to it. Let's face it, most movies are very naturalistic, and I mean, hopefully this is naturalistic too. I mean, it's just the way they talk. It's a period film, but I mean, in the sense that it's recognizable behavior and recognizable, you know, it's more prosaic.
Yeah. Did he talk to you much about what influenced the script? You know, there are lines in the credits about that.
You know, initially, he's a freak for research. I mean, he's really a guy that lives deeply in the past. I mean, this is what turns him on. And I think it's probably what excited me about The Witch. When I saw The Witch, you could enter that world so deeply because he made it perfect. You know, you didn't feel like you were watching a period movie. It was so complete. Sometimes in period movies, through costumes or through props, or they point, you know, this is this period, you know. There's all kinds of signposts. But he has such... did it so elegantly and with such confidence and authority because he's so well researched. Yeah. So it was similar with this. So the language, you know, I didn't know initially where it came from, but he gave me lots of material to work with, and a lot of visual references, you know, to kind of make the look of the character.
Do you remember what some of that material was that he gave you?
You know, it's well, like for the accent, for example, dialect tapes, right. Not like, you know, theatrical dialect tapes, but samples of people that worked in that kind of work, and a wide range. And we tried many different things, and then you just realized that it was written with a certain kind of cadence, and there was only one accent that it could be, and that was that kind of West Country. I guess it's Bristol, or maybe...
further down south than that, isn't it? It's more sort of Penzance, kind of Cornwall kind of accent, maybe?
I think it's... I think it's exactly where... what's his name came from? The, you know... the actor.
You did this to me backstage as well. Like, it was just...
Maybe I'm tired. I don't know. What's his name? The guy that got classic pirate. You know.
Blackbeard.
Yeah. What's his name? No, it's not Blackbeard. Anyway, we're wasting time here. You get the idea. A pirate accent. Hard R's, not the usual R getting tossed, you know? What? No, no.
Keep the answers coming. We'll get there eventually.
I'll call you all up when I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and say, oh!
Just leave your email addresses and we'll drop a note. Well, you started to answer that question. We had a question from Eileen who asked about how you prepare for the role. So, for you, did it start with the look, accent and then
the look and the accent and you know, those speeches aren't easy because some of the images, you know, first of all you got to find the music and you got to find the rhythm and find how to hang them together in a easy way, you know, and then make it not like a big show or make it so that language sticks out. You got to use it to work on the other guy because that's how he uses those speeches. They're, you know, whether he's cursing him or teaching him something or he's telling a story, you got to find the images and then you've got to, you know, connect them with actions. So one of the first things is just really get so those speeches are really flexible. It's the way you talk. Get comfortable with that. That's important. And then it's the kind of thing that the weather informs what you're doing so much. How you're feeling, how you fit in those clothes, how you feel in those clothes, how you feel with the other actor. You can only prepare so much sometimes. You know?
Well, I believe Robert Pattinson was cast around the same time.
No, it was presented to both of us as this is the way it's going to be, yes or no. You know, which is not bad. You know, there's no choice. You just do, you know? Get down to it. Yeah.
Well, so
no pussyfooting around.
Yeah. I am curious, you know, it's hard to know how to describe this relationship that these two characters share in the film, and I think the closest I came to something that felt right was to call it an antagonistic friendship, in the sense that, like, there are moments where they're very close and having a lot of fun together, and moments where they're really not.
The way I look at it, you know, it's shifting all the time because put two people in a room and, you know, take away a predictable future, take away their food, and then start to, you know, hit the sauce and, you know, they're going to, you know, they're trying all kinds of ways to survive each other. So I think that's what's the beauty of the relationship, because when you think of the narrative, what the story is, it's so simple. It's two guys stuck in a lighthouse. No one comes to pick them up. The weather turns bad. They never were really great friends in the first place, and things go worse. You know, they're stripped of their identity, and then something elemental happens. So, you know, you see boss, you know, employee, you see father, son, you see there's even homoerotic elements. It looks like an old couple sometimes. You know, it keeps on shifting.
And what was your knowledge or experience of Rob beforehand? Had you met at all?
Rob Pattinson?
Yeah.
I mean, I had seen him in some movies, but I didn't know him. And the truth is, I still don't know him. No, I didn't know him from the shooting. I got to know him a little bit now that we're doing some press and things. But the shooting was the weather was so brutal, and there was no hanging out, you know, and we were always cold and wet. So whenever there was a break, you'd really kind of go get warm. So there wasn't a lot of hanging out. And also, their antagonistic relationship, I think he liked to go off because he likes to feel like everything's happening for the first time, so he doesn't like to do anything in front of until the camera's rolling. And that's fine, and it suits his role because he's a very reactive role. But in this case, I was very happy to rehearse because the camera language was very specific. So as far as business and what things I had to do, I wanted to rehearse, so I tended to stay on the set all the time to practice stuff. So it was, yeah. He works hard though. He was a good partner. I mean, there was only two of us basically, so we better be good to each other.
But I mean, because it is extraordinary what I think the two of you do together in this film, and but it does make you curious. Like, how much does the nature of the character's relationship get mirrored in the nature of the actor's relationship? Is that something that you find, like, you know, in both directions has happened over the course of the roles that you've done?
Yeah,
or?
in this case, it's hard. It goes in and out, and it depends on the actor and the people. I mean, there's so many variables, I think. But in this case, it's curious that I remember I did an interview with him for Interview magazine, you know, where sometimes they have actors interview actors. And when we were talking, there was so much we had in common. And it was like, where have you been? I had no idea you were thinking those things, you know, when we were on the set, because we didn't share that kind of intimacy. We shared the intimacy of the characters, but we didn't share intimacy outside of it. And I think just because we were working hard, and as I say, it was really terrible conditions. So you were always busy. There was no time for small talk, you know.
Well, tell me a little bit more about those conditions, because there's something weird about watching this film where it feels like the temperature in the room drops. You know, the wind sweeps in, and
you know, it was cold. I remember that we had a little party the day before we started shooting, and I lived in a little fishing cottage right near the location where everyone else lived in town, and the party was in town. And I went into town. I didn't almost make it back because there was a snowstorm, and that was like in April, you know. Yeah. For you Californians, it's hard to wrap your brain around that. But when you're in Nova Scotia, you know, and just, we're on a little spit of land. It's not really an island. We made it look like an island because you needed road access. It wouldn't be practical to, you know, come in with boats every day with all the equipment. But it's a spit of island right out into the ocean, so you're getting wind, you know, really strong wind and really strong weather, and it's changing a lot. So that conditioned everything. The weather told us what we had to do. It was incredible, though, because, you know, everything in this movie is built. None of that existed. That lighthouse they built, and you know, it had to withstand really gale force, you know, winds sometimes. And sometimes we were up there and it was pretty crazy, and we were tied in and all that. But I mean, one shot, you see it very, very briefly, but, you know, we're naked up there and they're spraying us with water, and, you know, the thing is kind of going like this a little bit in the wind. It's pretty crazy.
I mean, there's also another shot in the film that I found extraordinary yesterday, and I wondered how practical that was. Where the waves are lashing at this lighthouse. Were they that close? Was the sea that rough out there?
Sometimes, I mean, but also it was enhanced sometimes. Water cannons, can you imagine? You know, these things that shoot these huge, you know, yeah, and we're standing in front of it sometimes.
Yeah. This isn't brutal enough. If we could just make it a little bit more brutal, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's all, I mean, I'm really not complaining because that's kind of fun. And it, you know, no acting is required. When you're cold, you're cold. You know, when you're wet, you're wet. I mean, it helps you out.
Well, you also suffered the indignity of being buried alive in this film.
Oh, God, yes.
Is that real dirt?
That's dirt.
Wow.
You know, they try to mix it up with other things, but in the end, you know, the idea is when you get near his face, use the cake mix or whatever. But it doesn't work out that way. Believe me, I ate more dirt shooting that than you can imagine. No, you know, it was like, yeah, that was a very strong feeling. And I had to keep the speech going. So well, it's good, actually. I mean, it's tough, but it's nice to have lots of tasks, you know, because there's no, you can't get off it, you know, because if you don't do those tasks, it becomes even more uncomfortable. So you keep the speech going, you're trying to keep the scene going, you're trying not to choke, you're trying to keep all the negative body stuff, because I'm in cold water, you know, you're just bone cold, you're trembling, you know, all that's going on. So it focuses you. And as long as you survive it, you know, no, you know, it's, you have an authentic experience. And it's transparent because you're not delivering anything, you're not interpreting anything, you're not showing anything, you're doing it. And that's one of the nice things, of course, about working on location, because the conditions tell you, you become part of the fabric of what's there and what's going on.
Is there an element, though, when you're playing a character like this, that the kind of the craziness of it seeps in a little bit? Do you start feeling the rawness of the journey that this guy's on?
Oh, maybe a little bit. I mean, maybe, you know, sometimes like when you're doing stuff all day, it seeps into your dreams and you start to feel like it has been your experience. I mean, you know, you all probably feel that having done roles. It's not like you welcome that, or not like that you're sick or you lose yourself in the role, but just by sheer, you know, hours of the day, if you're doing something for 10 hours and then you go to sleep, you know, that's going to enter your dreams.
Well, we have a question from Francisco, and you touched on it a little when you mentioned the rehearsal process on the film. Yeah. He says, in the theatre you get a chance to flush out the beats with rehearsal. How did you manage it on this film, working out the character, the beats, the intentions, actions?
Not so much. I mean, the intentions were quite clear because the script was very clear. And we had a little rehearsal, but what was funny is it wasn't traditionally for the actors. It wasn't to work out or talk about what the characters were doing. It was for the camera, because the language was, language of the camera was so complicated and so precise that basically they'd set up the camera and then they'd say, this is what the shot. Yeah, work around it. Figure out how the scene fits into this. If you feel like your character wants to go over there, forget it. Because you'll be out of the shot, and we're not shooting coverage, so, you know, maybe he doesn't go over there. You know? You know? Okay, maybe it's easier to go from there and light your pipe from the candle over there. No, but it looks much better if you have to open the potbelly stove, find an amber, bring it to your thing while you're doing the speech, you know, get it going, keep it going, close the thing, not burn yourself, you know. That's rehearsal. That's not talking about motivation. That's, it was practical, and also so we could understand that defined the scene, you know, that was the structure, and it was a great help, actually, because, you know, you talk a lot about choices and decisions when you're making a scene or when you're creating a character. Sometimes when you take away a lot of those choices, it really allows you to execute in a much on a deeper level, because you're not wasting any energy deciding on things. You're just accomplishing tasks. And I respond to that very much, because I believe in the wisdom of the body, and once you know what to do, you go towards it, and stuff happens that you couldn't even imagine, you know, because you're submitting to the action. You're not playing the action. You're not showing the action. You're accomplishing things, and like anything, it's there's always surprises. You know, I don't think spontaneity depends on invention all the time. You know what you have to do, and you try to, you know, you do it, and you're always surprised what the feeling is if you're open to it. I mean, you guys know this. I'm just thinking out loud.
Is it as satisfying then as an experience which is more, I suppose, you know, more in the authorship of what you're doing, you know, in improvisation and in creation?
It's, yeah, I don't, you know.
Hard question to answer, maybe.
Yeah, it's apples and oranges. Yeah. I like them both. Right. You know, probably after this, I did a movie that was done with totally improvised. Right. And half of it was in Italian too, a language that I speak, but I'm not fluent in.
Tommaso?
Tommaso. Yeah, because that came after. Right. And the truth is, I'm happy in both situations. Yeah, they're just different.
Well, I mean, I'd love to ask about that film and also Motherless Brooklyn that you're also in this year. You know, three very, very different roles, and it strikes me, you know, you've had an extraordinary run of great roles. At Eternity's Gate was wonderful. The Florida Project was wonderful.
Great. Thanks.
I suppose what's your philosophy behind, you know, the material that you get sent, the roles that you get offered? How do you figure out a barometer for what is of interest and what isn't?
Couple of things. First of all, I don't think I really think in terms of characters so much, because on some level you don't know what a character is until you're there, until you get there. And even then, sometimes you don't know. A character is a proposal. You look at the thing and you say, do I want to do these things? Do I have to learn how to do them? Is this resonant for me? Will this take me to a place that I'll learn something or I'll have a new understanding? That turns you on. For me, and I think most people are this way, that if you know what it is exactly, then it just kind of becomes an exercise of craft and becomes work. It's not as much fun. It's much more fun to find something where you have enough confidence that you know you can approach it, or you have some relationship to it to start, but you don't know what it is. And really the creative process is finding out something. You know, it's an act of discovery. But having said that, I also think that that act of discovery is no good if it's not captured and if people don't, you know, frame it properly. So I think I gravitate also towards people and situations, how you're shooting the movie and who the director is, who your partners are. Probably less your partners, because I think sometimes it's not good to choose them. Sometimes, you know, when I've been in situations where I can choose my acting partners, strangely enough, I think it's a bad idea. You should have them be given to you, and then you got to deal with them. No, really, because it makes you more flexible and creative. But I think it's human nature to tend to, if you have control, you'll take something that you feel control over, or you feel comfortable with. And it's nice to be relaxed, it's nice to be confident, but I think on some level, you know, you have to be pushed, or at least I do. Not because I'm lazy, not because I'm not curious, I just think human nature, we go to what's familiar, but what's exciting usually is to go to places that we don't know.
Looking back on the people that you've shared the screen with, I wonder, are there experiences with actors that stand out in your mind as being formative experiences for you in terms of the development of your career?
I think so. I can't cite them right off the top of my head because everybody's so different. You know, there's no one way. I've been very lucky, though. I will say, for the most part. And I think it's probably because I gravitate towards certain directors in certain situations that those situations don't attract people that aren't interested in we all have a common bond that we're interested in a certain kind of work, and that helps a lot. And the only problem ever happens is when someone is kind of going it alone. I mean, I think from the theater, one thing that it taught me is, you know, I like being part of a team. Right. And I don't mean to sound Pollyanna, like, you know, oh, we're, you know, kumbaya. But it's true. It's necessary because, you know, it's so interconnected and everybody's so dependent on each other that the only problem happens is when someone's a little too egocentric, right. I think. Right. Whether it's the director or the actor or even a DP, you know. They can get stuck and they can lose they lose receptivity to what's around them. So I think, you know, you get a sense, with a little practice, you get a sense of trying to steer clear of those people if you can. Sometimes your other people are handed to you. I don't have them, you know, sometimes you, yeah, you know.
Well, since you mentioned your work on the stage, we have a question that actually came from 4 people. Yeah, Melina.
Think alike?
Absolutely, yeah. Melina, Matt, Dalton, and Patrick all asked about your work with the Wooster Group, and how that's there. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
And how that's informed your acting.
It formed everything. I mean, I had worked a little bit before that, but it really shaped how I think, how I approach things. And that always changes, but I mean the basic why, where, and how I approach things was formed by that, I'd say. And I can't tell you exactly what that is, but it's, you know, I think so much of it has to do with action, task-oriented performance, not thinking about emotion, not think about, you know, think about doing, not showing, and thinking about inhabiting rather than interpreting. Because the Wooster Group was it's complex. I can't, for people that don't know it, I can't describe it easily, but I will say what it was not. It was not a traditional theater, and it wasn't a theater based very much on a psychological approach or with great reverence all the time for literature. It wasn't an interpretation of plays. It wasn't a staging of plays. It was more, because the people that were there, it was a theater company founded in the late 60s, at least it grew out of the performance group and then became the Wooster Group in the mid-70s when I came along. And it was a group of people that weren't actors. They were writers, they were poets, they were musicians, they were dancers, but they weren't making theater. So that really, that had a huge influence on me. And also, the technicians were like actors, and the actors were technicians, because we were playing a lot with video in those days, very early, practically, not as a scenic element, not as just another way to make pretty images, but just practically, like once we were working on Three Sisters, one of the characters was 93 years old, and the actress was 93 years old. She couldn't always be there, so we put her on tape, and when she couldn't be there, we'd roll out the television, and you'd play the scene with the television. We had a very practical approach.
So someone suggested this question to me, and I'm fascinated now. It's the classic SAG question. How did you get your SAG card?
I probably got it on The Loveless, which was Catherine Bigelow's first film.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably shot in probably 79, yeah.
You also were famously fired from, and I don't mean to...
Heaven's Gate, yeah.
From Heaven's Gate, yeah. I don't mean to like dredge up...
Such a popular story when I do these kind of things. I mean, jeez Louise. It's a good story, but...
Well, no, so the reason I was doing so well.
No, you're doing well, but I wasn't. Yeah, I'm not very good at this, but I'll try to make it really quick. Oh, yeah. Heaven's Gate. Know the film? Oh, yeah. Hired. It's hard to make it quick. The truth is, I laughed during a lighting setup where we were standing in place for 8 hours. And someone told me a joke, I laughed. And Cimino, who was the director, Michael Cimino, who was under a lot of pressure at the time, was just stressed. He heard a laugh. He had his back to me. He turned around, saw me giggling, and said, "Willem, step out," in front of everybody. And there was this audible, you know, with everybody. And I left. They sent me to my hotel room and basically said, "That's it." And they could do that because I had a role. I was working like every day, but I had an unscripted role. I was part of a kind of a chorus of immigrants, and we were kind of making the roles up as we were going along. Hence, a film that started out as a 3-month shoot ballooned into an 8-month shoot and went from $8 million to $40 million or something like that. You got to check my numbers, but I think that's about right. So I was fired and deeply humiliated, but there was, you know, because that was basically my first like studio job. I had made little downtown art movies, but nothing like this. And, you know, I just thought humiliated, embarrassed, even though it wasn't a big offense or it wasn't really a judgment of what I was doing. It was an unfortunate thing. But I thought, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this. And I went happily back to the theater. And, you know, with time, then next opportunity, I hopped on it, which was The Loveless, which was a very low-budget film. It's fun to mention that it's Catherine Bigelow's first feature. She co-directed it with a guy called Monty Montgomery, who went on to be a producer for David Lynch. Yeah.
Well, it's not long after that, really, that I mean, you received your first Oscar nomination for Platoon in '86, I think.
So long enough.
I mean, sure, I'm sure.
No, it was great. I mean, Platoon, '86. I mean, I started make, you know, first movie that '79. That's 7 years. Yeah. Platoon was great because it was a low-budget movie, you know, and with a bunch of. Tom Berenger was like an old hand. I had made a couple of movies. I had made To Live and Die in L.A. and The Streets of Fire and Loveless and a couple other things. But it was mostly kids. And then you had this guy that was unlike anyone I had ever met in Hollywood called Oliver Stone that wanted to tell this personal story. And we went out to the Philippines and made it down and dirty and trained really hard, and it was a special experience. So then on top of it, to get critical play and popular, you know, support, you know, have it be a popular movie was very sweet, because it was a true independent low budget movie.
Well, and not long after that, I mean, you know, you played Jesus in The Last Temptation of Christ.
Yep.
You played, you were also in Mississippi Burning, which was another controversial film.
Yes.
Absolutely. You know, you have a history with Lars von Trier, the great provocateur of European cinema. There strikes me that there is some common ground here in all of this work, that perhaps, you know...
Good directors?
Well, good directors, of course. But
auteurs?
Also, yes, absolutely. But also
curious people?
Equally a fearlessness, I would suggest.
Pardon?
A fearlessness.
On my part?
On your part, yeah.
That sounds nice.
You don't feel that yourself? You don't
Yeah, you know, it's like you don't feel fearless if you're fearless. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
It's really, you know, it's like, you know, cowards are courageous. I don't know, you know. I don't know. And I'm not being falsely modest. I only know what I know. I only go towards what I go towards. And I go towards because it's the only thing I know how to do. So I'm flattered because that sounds good. Someone that's fearless. That's, you know, that's why I'm in this game. I want to lose all fear. You know, I don't want to have fear. Fear is the thing that kills us, you know. So part of taking risks is not a calculated thing that it's cool or that it's even better than another way. It's just my calling, because I really do sincerely feel that through work you can not use it as therapy, but you can change how you think, and you can change how other people think. And you don't accept, and when you don't accept things just for their face value, you accept experience, and you try to share that experience with people. That's what the good part of making anything is. It's not just, commonly we boil it down to stories, telling stories, but I think it's more than that. It's really, you know, that primitive impulse of sharing experience. So to have those experiences mean anything, I think you have to have some sort of stake. You have to risk something. Otherwise, they're sort of meaningless. And you have to go towards something that you don't know, because it's only in learning or change that anything is accomplished. Otherwise, you're just supporting. You can create an entertainment, and you can have fun, and people can admire your craft if you have it, or your talent if you have it. But that's not the best part. The best part is that kind of jumping off a cliff. And I think as actors, we respond to that, and as audience, we respond to that. And the only trick is, how do you get that feeling? How do you get that situation? And I think everybody longs for that, because not that it makes you heroic, but it's feeling. It's I don't know.
Well, we are almost out of time, but before we go, we have a question from Jeremy Wade. You've played so many interesting characters throughout your career. Do you have a favorite? Are you able to have a favorite?
Oh, God. I'm so bad at these questions. Choice questions. No. You know, conventionally the one you're working on, but it's true, let's face it, because it does no good to hang on to a favorite, because then you'll repeat yourself, or you'll long for that thing, and you don't want to do that, because you can't go forward unless you play the same role over and over again. We could do that.
and finally then, Kate wants to know if you apply that same philosophy to ice cream flavor.
Sort of. I'm a little partial to chocolate. Butter pecan, mint chocolate chip. But you know what? I barely eat ice cream anymore.
Well,
there's better things.
Indeed. On that bombshell, ladies and gentlemen, please join me on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation in thanking Willem Dafoe.